Okay, this week was Goodbye Lenin. I want to kind of get more into Cold War and Russian communism and maybe some things we didn't necessarily get into with previous episodes. So we've talked about World War II and a little bit maybe of the fallout after that. We talked about Charlie Wilson's wars being driven by the Cold War, and even something like 4 months, 3 weeks, 2 days, where we're dealing with communist Romania. But we haven't really got into a lot of maybe the whys. And I think here now, as we get to the end of not communism completely. Obviously, the fall of communism wasn't complete. Places like Cuba and China and Vietnam, and their communism there endured. But the majority of communist countries...
The fall of the Soviet Union.
Yeah, the Soviet Union, but also then, again, places like Romania and Germany, the communists kind of left or fell out of power there. So I kind of wanted to, let's bookend the whole Cold War, because I don't know if we specifically mentioned it. Obviously, after the fall of Germany in World War II, the Allied powers divided it up, and you ended up with Russia wanting some control over a more submissive German state that was set up communist like that. And that's what became East Germany.
Well, people generally think of East Germany and West Germany. It's actually divided up into quadrants.
Yeah.
So there was actually 4 sections. It's just that 3 of them were the United States, Great Britain, and France, which obviously all Western powers, capitalist powers. So they together were West Germany, and then East Germany was controlled by the Soviets. And then in East Germany, you had Berlin, which was also divided up into 4 sections, with the Soviets controlling one, and then the United States, Great Britain, and France controlling the rest. But you had the capitalist and communist divide, which the Soviets basically wanted to kick the Western powers out, so they blockaded the western part of the city. And this was in 1948 or 1949. They stopped all road and rail traffic going in, which then started the Berlin airlift, which went on for many months. And it was, when you look up stats on the Berlin airlift, it's insane. A plane is taking off or landing every 30 seconds for months on end. They're delivering, it was something like 8,000 tons of goods every single day by the end.
This is into West Germany is the idea? Or into West Berlin?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, into West Berlin.
Right.
Because
you basically couldn't drive there anymore because the Soviets
you couldn't drive there, and you couldn't get there by train because the Soviets had blocked off all of the land routes, because Berlin it was inside of East Germany.
Yeah. Now, the wall itself wasn't until 1961, but they still had...
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And eventually, the Soviets did allow ground traffic back into Berlin, but, that's just one of the big kind of historical events, regarding Berlin after World War II, is the Berlin airlift. And then you had what they called the brain drain, which was a bunch of young and educated people leaving East Germany, but specifically East Berlin, and leaving to the West because they didn't want to live under Soviet communism. So it was something like 15% of working age people left East Germany between the end of World War II and 1961. And that was when the Soviets basically said, all right, this is enough. We need to...
Right. It was killing their economy. Yeah.
Yeah. So they decided to basically completely seal off East Berlin from West Berlin.
Yes. So that's the world of our story today. And so the present in the story is kind of 1989 and 1990, but they flash back and show the main kid and his sister in 1978 in East Germany, East Berlin, and the kid's kind of obsessed with space. And it was kind of interesting to see on August 26th, 1978, the first German go up into space, and how proud this kid felt that he was kind of representing specifically, East Germany and everything. And what I found amusing is, of course, I was literally born the next day. So this is kind of the point on the timeline where I came into existence. I was born the day after that first German went into space. So I found that amusing.
And the guy's name is actually Sigmund Jähn.
Okay, yeah.
So the name and the guy that they show in the movie is a real guy. He was actually the first the first German to go to space.
Yes.
Some of the stuff, after after the fall of the Soviet Union and after East Germany, they they show him as like this taxi driver that never really amounted to anything. Like that's all made up for the movie.
Oh, okay. I wondered.
He did work for the German Aerospace Center for the European Space Agency basically for the rest of his career. So he was actually, still involved with going to space. He didn't just basically come back and become a taxi driver, but
although the guy in the movie says he's not him.
That's true.
The character in the movie says, I get that a lot.
That's true.
So I almost wonder it's not actually the guy in the movie, even though the kids actually think it is, and the guy's just going along with it.
Yeah.
Because when you ask him again, he's like, screw it, I'll just tell him like what it was like in space. So maybe the character actually isn't really the astronaut, which was kind of a fun little, not twist necessarily, but it's just like a fun thought. It's like, no, he really isn't the guy. The kid's wrong.
Right.
And actually, this movie wasn't as funny as I remembered. In my mind, this was a comedy. It's really not. If the premise is humorous.
I thought it was going to be more of a drama, just based on the beginning of the movie. I mean, there are definitely, I would almost call it a dramedy, because there are comical elements and there's comical scenes, but I thought it was going to be more of a straight up drama than it was.
Fair. I had seen it before, and in my mind, I had kind of categorized it as near farce with the efforts he was going through to kind of conceal the truth from his mother. So I had actually forgotten about the dramatic elements. So I think it's probably just a skewed memory because I had seen it before. And so the premise for those who haven't seen it, this is actually a really good movie. Mm-hmm. Basically, at the beginnings of the revolutions that will see the end of communism in East Germany and kind of all around Europe and even the end of the Soviet Union, their mother has a heart attack. It's actually during even like a protest. She sees her son getting arrested, has a heart attack, goes into a coma for 8 months. And that 8 months is basically when everything happened. So when she wakes back up and the doctors say any unnecessary stress could literally kill her. So the son has the brilliant idea of hiding the fact that everything has changed from her, which means hiding all the new Western culture and products that have infiltrated East Berlin in the 8 months that his mother's been in a coma. And kind of to humorous effect, but also kind of just the effect that everyone around him, his sister, his girlfriend, are all getting frustrated with him. They're like, she's going to be fine. It's not that big a deal. And he's almost become like obsessive about this project more than even how much it's probably protecting his mom. Anyway, it's just kind of interesting to see him jumping through these hoops of course, we as the viewer get frustrated with him too. Like, it's impressive the extents he's going, like even having a buddy make fake news reels that they can then play on the TV in
which
her
I
bedroom.
thought was kind of cool, like, especially for this podcast, because this is, it's about, there is a filmmaking element to this movie as well. Like he's showing him the wedding video that he makes where he like does like the cut with the bouquet flying through the air, and it mimics the cut from 2001,
right? Which of course our main guy doesn't get because he's never seen 2001 because he's from East Berlin.
right. Yeah, I just thought that was kind of cool, showing them, shooting these newsreels and editing footage together and basically making these home movies to trick his mom into thinking that, basically making the news whatever they want it to be.
Yeah. And that was kind of funny. His buddy's like a wannabe film director and is totally okay going through all this effort for an audience of one. Like, it's just for this guy's mom to kind of keep her, and they kind of, to keep going through bigger and bigger ordeals to basically to explain, why is there a big Coke banner on the building outside my window, and why did I see all this Western stuff?
Why is everyone wearing Western clothes, and why is there a BMW dealership across the street now? And
they did come up with a clever way to explain it away, because what's also significant is the mom actually enjoyed the socialist kind of republic thing going on in East Germany. She embraced it.
She basically, at the beginning of the movie, they talk about how they say his dad basically defected to West Germany with some other woman and left their family. And then their mom basically, substituted the Soviet Union for her husband.
Right. And she was now married to the state. Yeah.
Right. She's now married to the state. So she just became super involved with the cause of the Soviets.
Right. And took a lot of pride, but also in an interesting way, and something you wouldn't necessarily think about, was almost kind of like a Ralph Nader type. She was like an advocate for change to help the consumers and would write letters to companies and the government to try to make their lives better. So she was an advocate for, in a way, progressivism, but which fell within the constraints of the system. So she wasn't fighting against the system, but she was striving to make it better for the people within it, and was kind of an advocate, which is, I guess, a role you wouldn't necessarily think of existing. You would think someone that challenged the state would be on an enemies list, but she did it from a place of love, which I thought was kind of fascinating.
Right. And she wasn't saying like the Soviet Union is bad because these things are bad. She would say like, here are some ways, I love the Soviet Union. I want it to be the best it can possibly be. So here are some ways that we can improve.
Right. When you're giving us these state-controlled things, maybe consider this, and it would be a better way to do the state-controlled thing. Yeah.
Right.
And then the big twist I'd actually forgotten is that the dad didn't actually leave. He went first, and she was supposed to follow with the kids and got cold feet.
Yes. Right. He went to a conference in West Germany, and she was basically supposed to just make a run for it. But then she said, well, I couldn't get the visas, and it was so hard. Like, it would have been so hard. And what was I supposed to do? Like, so she just stayed behind with her kids. And then he sent letters for years, and she hid them all from the kids.
Right. Talk about a betrayal. Yeah.
And then made up this lie. Yeah. Which that actually, I did want to talk about, like the real life events surrounding escapes from East Berlin to West Berlin. A bunch of people tried to do it over the years. I guess there were a lot that were successful, a bunch that weren't, which usually resulted in death because the East German guards basically had orders to shoot on sight people that they saw trying to defect. But some of the ways that people actually did end up leaving were pretty creative. You had people that like tunneled under the wall. You had people that like made like homemade zip lines. One guy made a tightrope that he walked across. Somebody made a homemade hot air balloon. There was a guy who he had this convertible, and he lowered it and took the windshield off, and then basically drove up to this checkpoint kind of nonchalantly, and then at the last second gunned it through, and his car was low enough that it just slid right under the gate, or the little crossing bar thing that they had there.
Barricade thing, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, then there was a guy who set up a fake film segment. He told the guards, "Oh, I want to film this scene to show how much we appreciate you border guards standing here and keeping us safe." And he had these girls that were helping him out, so they came up and they were giving the guards flowers and stuff and pretending to shoot this film scene where they were appreciative of the guards. And then he basically just was able to kind of get their defenses down. And then at one point he was close enough to the gate that he just made a run for it and made it into West Berlin.
Because once you're over there, West Berlin had no responsibility to return you. They were just like, okay, hey,
right.
Look, yeah. So it's once you escaped, you were free.
And they're not going to risk World War III by shooting into West Berlin to stop somebody. Basically, once you make it across, you're home free.
Oh, even if you're 100 feet looking back at the gate, they're not going to shoot at you. I didn't think about that. You're right.
Right. Yeah.
Huh.
Because that would be attacking West Berlin at that point. But there were obviously a bunch of people that were not successful. I think the confirmed number is 170 something people over the years. Oh, I guess it was from 1961 to the end of the Cold War. 170 something people confirmed to have died trying to escape.
Okay.
But I think they estimate the number to be into the 200s. That's just the ones that we know about.
So I wanted to talk about basically this 1989. Even though I lived through this, I was just too young to really appreciate what was happening at the time. I was cognizant that the Berlin Wall was coming down, but I couldn't appreciate the significance of it, other than just my parents were probably saying it was a big deal. So what was kind of fascinating, so they kind of call them all the revolutions of 1989. Specifically, the one in Germany was called the Peaceful Revolution.
Is that what we see in the movie, the protests and stuff? Is that part of what is going on there?
Yeah, I mean that is kind of the impetus. So here's the timeline listed on the Peaceful Revolution Wikipedia page. It says basically in June that Hungary opened a border fence with Austria. In August, they kind of started lifting some of the travel bans. In September, there start being demonstrations in East Germany, and that's kind of what we see then into October. Those are just kind of continued, it looks like, and that's where the mom kind of went under. And then by November, the wall's coming down. And then what's interesting is basically what I still probably really didn't understand until kind of just doing some research before we got on the phone here is why wasn't it more violent? And it's basically because the Soviet Union had loosened its grip, and what basically the government no longer was willing to put forth the effort to suppress the population that wasn't willing to be under their thumb anymore, and they just kind of said you're not in charge anymore, and the government's yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I thought it was funny too. Apparently, the actual event of like the opening of the border was a mistake. It was like
They're
they
right.
sent some guy out to do this press
Yeah,
conference.
it wasn't a go ahead. It wasn't like the green light. It's now officially coming down. The people
Yeah,
started taking it down, and no one stopped them.
well, and right, and it all started because this guy that the government sent out to talk. I guess he got sent out to make an announcement that they were going to start allowing people to apply for visas.
Okay, yeah,
And
loosening up the borders. Yeah,
loosey goosey, you could apply for a visa. You can go to East Germany, go between East and West Germany whenever you want. Just apply and we'll approve it. Whatever, no big deal.
and so they just start taking the wall down.
And there was a journalist was like, when is this going into effect? And they goes, oh yeah, right now, like effective immediately. You can pretty much travel. And people were like, oh okay. And so they just mass floods to the border crossings. And I guess they like. At first, the guys were like, "Oh, call orderly fashion. We need to check everyone's passports." And they were like,
"Screw it."
There's like 3 of us, and there's like 5,000 people in this crowd. Whatever, do whatever you want. And then that's when they started tearing down the wall.
What a moment. That's kind of crazy to think about. So specifically, I feel like someone who doesn't get enough credit, and it's probably because we tend to give a lot of the credit to Reagan, and despite not being a big Reagan fan, I think there's some validity to that. I think he does deserve a lot of credit for kind of helping to. His relationship with Gorbachev was, I think, kind of instrumental. So I was kind of like reading just on Gorbachev's Wikipedia page here, and basically, even though he kind of grew up within the Soviet system and as a member of the party, he was definitely an anti-Stalinist. And when it kind of came around, he was just way more relaxed on the way they did things. And again, he was just kind of chill about what was in the best interest of the people. And so basically, if Gorbachev was a hardliner, none of this happens, or it doesn't happen until much later.
Right. And we talked about this in the Charlie Wilson's War episode. That was one of the reasons why the Soviet-Afghan War actually ended, was because Brezhnev was out, Gorbachev was in, and Gorbachev was anti-war and he was an anti-interventionist. So he didn't think that that the Soviets should have been in Afghanistan doing that anyway. And then like we see here, he really was not really that concerned with making sure that they kept a firm grip on East Germany. And so they, like you said, they were rolling back restrictions until eventually there was just no reason for the people in East Germany to not just tear down the wall themselves.
Right. And the dude won the Nobel Peace Prize for all his work in all this stuff. And I think it's someone maybe in the West we don't give enough credit to, because despite Reagan was kind of just the one prodding him. But if it had been a Putin type in charge at that time, Reagan wouldn't have been able to make any kind of progress. And ultimately it had to come from the Soviets.
Right.
What's interesting though too, you think about how that kind of ties in. So, and this is getting ahead of ourselves here, but as the Soviet Union got rid of communism, but then maybe struggled economically, that's why they kind of, not all the country, but enough of the country embraces a old school hardliner dictator type like a Putin, because he's kind of advocating for Soviet greatness in a way that maybe had become lax in the last 30 years. And they're kind of okay with him flexing his muscle on behalf of the Russians in a way that maybe they're nostalgic for. I don't know. Because wasn't Putin even like a KGB guy and everything back in the day?
Yeah. Yep.
And Germany obviously was united within just months. I think officially reunited in 1990, and then they talk about them winning the World Cup basically right after. And
which was I was going to bring that up too. That was like a huge deal, that the first year that Germany is reunited, they are all rallying behind one soccer team in the World Cup, and then they win that year.
It's kind of like, makes me think of like Invictus with South Africa, where they kind of do the same thing with rugby. So that kind of happened. I'm surprised they haven't had a movie from that point of view about this German soccer team. So very solid. This movie is a 90% on Rotten Tomatoes, and it does star. Did you recognize Daniel Bruhl from Inglourious Basterds?
From Inglourious Basterds, and he is also and I don't know if you're into the Marvel movies, but he's also he plays the villain in Captain America: Civil War,
which I've seen it, but I couldn't picture him in that. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's where people recognize him from, is either going to be Inglourious Basterds or Captain America: Civil War.
Okay, because I didn't recognize the character name Zemo that it says is his name. It also says he's working on a upcoming All Quiet on the Western Front film.
That would be cool. I do like him as an actor. I mean, I've only seen him in this and the other 2 movies that we just mentioned. But apparently he is also if you watch Cars dubbed into German, he's Lightning McQueen.
Oh, nice. Perfect.
So people probably will recognize his voice if like me, you like to watch Pixar movies dubbed into German.
Well, that does sound fun. It did not get any Oscar nominations, but it was nominated for the Golden Globe for Best Foreign Film for movies from 2003. But yeah, definitely want to check out. I love the concept, and the stuff with the dad and kind of getting to reconnect is pretty powerful.
Spoiler alert for people who haven't seen the movie. What I thought was even more emotionally impactful than the big twist of, oh, just kidding, your dad didn't leave you. We were all going to defect. He spends all that time trying to keep his mom from knowing what happened. And then right before he's about to show her the video that he makes showing how East and West Berlin are reunited, he doesn't see it, but the audience sees his girlfriend actually explains the whole thing to his mom right before he comes in and shows her this fake newscast that he made. And she never lets on. He thinks that she died, believing everything that he told him. But he shows her this video of, he got the taxi driver who may or may not be the actual astronaut to do a segment where they pretend that he's actually the new leader of East Germany and that he's the one responsible for the reunification. And she knows the whole time that it's all fake, but she doesn't say anything. And she's actually has a smile on her face. She is so appreciative of all the effort that he went to try and keep her safe and healthy and keep her from finding out because he didn't want her to have another episode. And I think that was even more of a tear-up, emotional gut punch moment than finding out that his dad was writing him letters.
Oh, see, for me, it was when he goes to the dad's house on the day they're actually having a party for him, and he sees the kids watching TV during the party, and he goes in and sits with the kids who are his half-siblings he's never met.
Yeah.
And they're watching the same show that he used to like growing up, and the dad comes in to check on him, and they're like, whoa, who's this? And the kids say, oh, this is Alex. And the dad, I'm getting chills right now because the you see the gears turning in the dad's head as he realizes, holy cow.
He goes, I don't know you. Have we met before? And he goes, yeah, we've met. And the kids, he goes, oh, what's your name? And the kid goes, oh, his name's Alexander. And then he's sitting there and he's kind of, you can see the gears turning. He goes, Alex? And then it's like, yep.
Yeah.
I'm your son, dude.
And it almost be more powerful if Alex actually kind of got more invested. He was more just like, whatever, dude. Even though, doesn't he know at that point the mom didn't? The mom was the bad guy, technically, not the dad.
Yeah, he knows. He knows. Okay. But it's still kind of this emotional thing. And then also...
It's awkward.
Right. Yeah. And he takes him to the hospital. He says, hey, just so you know, you can't tell mom that that Germany's back together and everything. But the mom already knows because it's when they're walking up that you see the girlfriend is telling the mom everything. So then he goes in and talks, dad goes in and talks to the mom and the son leaves. Right. So... That's another thing too is
we're not privy to that conversation.
Right, but they obviously. I mean, I can only imagine that he's like, East Germany, and she's like, calm down, dude. I already know. I'm just playing along now too. Because it almost becomes just as much for him as it does for her.
Exactly,
in a way.
Because he became so OCD about protecting her. And she probably didn't need to be protected as severe, even though, hey, she does ultimately die from her illness, but she didn't necessarily need protected in the way that Alex was trying to protect her.
And when at the beginning of the movie, he's kind of a deadbeat isn't really the word, but he kind of doesn't really have a direction. He's kind of just, his sister's like, did you sleep in your clothes again? And, he's not really doing anything, no girlfriend, kind of a job that he doesn't really like or care about. And then this kind of mission of making his mom's life, trying to show her that East and West Germany are still separate. It gives him this purpose and this drive. And so, I thought that was kind of cool.
Okay. And this is the movie that officially brings us into the 90s on our timeline. So we are now into the decade that you'll be born.
Yes.
And we'll see if that comes out a little more precise. Actually, we'll pass it next week because we'll be in 1994 next week with the very, very dark, depressing, but important movie, Hotel Rwanda.